Great, thanks, Elliot. I hope you can all hear and see me well. I hope no one's moving away for a coffee break or enjoying his or her coffee while I'm doing my demonstration and showcase. Thank you so much to the team at Nothing, Bronwyn, Elliot, and all the others for allowing me to speak today. I wanted to talk about auCheck, which is a joint initiative by my organization, which is the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, and AUDA, really to help greater adoption in Australia of internet standards. So when we look at cybersecurity, because that's kind of the main angle, and taking this perspective of an average citizen or small business in Australia, you'll likely hear of cybersecurity, as we just heard in the previous panel, we talk about government policy, government strategy, or, and presumably later on in the program, we talk about, let's say, basic cyber hygiene steps that individuals can take, talking about, let's say, password protection, multi-factor authentication, etc. But what's really kind of happening in the middle ground, that big middle ground, remains largely invisible, which is mostly of a technical nature and unknown to the general public. And obviously most people who are using the internet and their websites and emails are not technically skilled, not technically kind of equipped or knowledgeable to the extent of kind of really understanding what's all behind it. Now, technical and internet standards are obviously, let's say, a big part of that big middle ground. Actually, Ambassador Fegan talked about that as well in his opening remarks. So why do standards matter for kind of average citizens, average users of the internet, and average users of websites, emails, etc.? That's because of this. These are just kind of a couple of headlines that we picked up over the last 2 to 3 years, which is looking at flaws in the adoption of internet standards, and you see things there like DMARC adoption, which is an email security protocol. You see a couple of even federal government websites which have not secure next to their URL, including the Department of Defense. I think that has been remedied recently, but that was the case not too long ago. So really, internet standards are significant for our basic internet security. And if you've read the latest ACSC threat report, you'll notice that most incidents affecting the bulk of victims have to do with quite basic level infringements, such as phishing emails, insecure websites, actually the things that are listed here on the slide. And the premise here is that if technical standards would have been followed, such breaches would have been much harder to commit and would have created a higher barrier to the perpetrator. In the words of Ian Levy, who is the Deputy Director of the UK National Cybersecurity Centre, we really need to step up and do basic things at scale. And technical standards are one of the avenues to achieve that. The biggest challenge with technical standards, however, is that they are voluntary. In our view, is not really pushed by a central body, such as the Australian Cybersecurity Centre. And allegedly, at least there's a strong perception that they involve costs for kind of the technical community, the business community, providing websites, hosting services, etc. But maybe most of all, there is just no real user demand for service providers to follow and enable relevant standards. And in a way, Australia is not an exception. Australia is, in fact, very typical for most economies. And that's where we were inspired by 2 initiatives. One in the UK, which is called WebCheck, as well as MailCheck, which is an initiative from the UK, the United Kingdom's National Cybersecurity Centre, but for government only. So they give, let's say, local government agencies a tool to check whether their online services follow technical standards. And the second one is a tool that was launched a couple of years back in the Netherlands, which is called Internet.nl. And that's really kind of a multi-stakeholder public-private collaboration between the non-commercial technical community, say the IGF community here represented today, and the central government to encourage, to encourage small business e-commerce platforms and the internet service provider community to pick up on the adoption of internet security standards, and by that creating a more healthy and more secure, in this case, .nl domain, and in our case, a .au domain. And that inspired us to develop auCheck. auCheck is based on the Internet.nl model and their source code. And I'll show you in a minute what it looks like. But not before I want to kind of stipulate that this project has been ongoing for about 2.5 years. And we've been consulting widely in the community. In the past, it's organizing consultation meetings with folks in different capital cities, as well as reaching out to representatives of the small and medium business community here in Australia. Now, I'm moving away from my PowerPoint slide, hopefully, and we'll share the actual tool, which is currently kind of in the final phase of development. So we should be launching that in a couple of weeks' time, hopefully. And this is how it looks like at the moment. I want to stress as well that the tool is explicitly a non-commercial, independent, and free service. So our mission is really to empower users or end users, in particular Australian small businesses, to ask the right questions from their service providers and request the right level of security in the form of adoption and enabling of internet standards. So this is the landing page, as you can see, and we offer there 4 types of tests. So there is a test that checks whether your website is compliant or following internet security standards, whether your email domain is following standards, as well as your current connection, and finally, whether you have an up-to-date content management system on your website. Now, what are the standards that we're looking at? And you see them listed here. So there are a couple of very proper security standards when we talk about HTTPS, so HTTP secure, the TLS version, the encryption version you're using, and whether you're using adequate and correct certificates for your website domain as well as for your email domain. We also talk about common tools against phishing, and you saw them on the headlines. So checking whether an email domain is enabled with DMARC policy, DKIM, and something called the SPF protocol, the Standard Policy Framework Protocol. But this is just kind of a list of standards, and I think if you would ask 100 different people which standard we should follow, you will get 100 different answers. But this was kind of the basic set of standards that everyone kind of agreed to were the basic and the minimum required standards. They also derived, if you look at the information security manual that the Australian Signals Directorate is publishing, most of them appear there as well, in particular the security standards, of course. And they're also based on international good practice as advocated by a couple of global technical organizations, including APNIC and Internet Society and ICANN, also represented here in the meeting. Where we differ from some of the other tools that we've adjusted our weightings to the actual situation in Australia. So the tool is really kind of meant also to address the Australian market. So not just to put things down in English, but also to refer to Australian references and to make sure that whatever we rate and grade and check is aligned with what's currently available in the Australian market and is aligned with the priority given to it by the Australian government in the form of the ASD Information Security Manual. As I mentioned, there are 4 checks that we offer: website, email, connection, and content management system. And we're now in a situation that in the future we can add additional checks to it if we think that's valuable and required. So now let me just show you how a test looks like when I run our own ASPI.org.au website test. And you will see that obviously we're scoring on 4 different things. It's the encryption and authenticity of the web server. It's the security of the domain name. In other words, whether we have DNS sec enabled, whether website applications are secure, and whether we have IPv6 adopted. And really what we're trying to encourage here is kind of sending a positive message. So we don't want to say you're bad at things. We want to say, you've got, let's say, most of the things in place, but there are a couple of things that you can improve on. So when you drill down to the individual tests, you'll find text explaining what it is about, what's the problem, and which steps you can take to improve your own situation. And obviously, it's given that the audience is mostly kind of individual people or small businesses who don't have kind of their in-house technical knowledge, is providing kind of clear messages about what can you ask from your service provider, whether it's your hosting provider, your registrar, or your email security provider, for instance. And that's where this layer of information comes in, because then we drill down more to the technical details of what we found, all based on open source testing. So we're just kind of checking existing public records, which and obviously doesn't include any penetration testing or something similar. It's really just checking the public records that are available anyway, and that can be amended and updated as well. So this is where you kind of can drill down to the individual tests. So for instance, this one shows whether you actually have HTTPS enabled, and it shows you the resource. So we're referring to the guidance note from the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, and it gives you the exact IP address that we checked and the result next to that. All this is weighted, as I mentioned. So the green one is intended as an essential requirement, and therefore gives you lots of points, so to speak. But there are also a number of tests that are really kind of optional or suggested or recommended, which don't follow exact guidance from the ACSC, and therefore does give you a result, but it doesn't contribute to your score. Again, the whole idea is to encourage people and businesses to uplift rather than say you're bad at certain things. The same test logic applies to the mail test and the connection test. The content management system test is slightly different, but again, there you will see whether the content management system is currently up to date. If this runs fairly quickly, I will be able to show you. So, for instance, our own content management system is recommended to go through an update as there is a newer patch available. Finally, I'm coming to the end of some of your coffee breaks and my demonstration. Your feedback is really very much appreciated. As I mentioned, we're going through the final round of kind of doing additions and checks on whether we're saying the right things and whether the message is clear enough. So any feedback, hopefully positive and constructive, is very much appreciated. And you can see an email here on the top right-hand side. Feel free to drop us a note, and we very much encourage any feedback from the community on how we can improve the information provided. And finally, what I also want to kind of flag is that obviously this is a partnership between ASPI, my organization, and AUDA, and many thanks for the AUDA team over the years for their incredible support and staying with us as we went through this. But if there are others who want to make a contribution, whether that's kind of in kind or be consulted, equally feel free to reach out to us. We really want to make this a kind of collaborative effort, a proper kind of multi-stakeholder or community effort to drive this forward over the years to come. That's 2 minutes before my allotted time. I'm not sure whether there were any